What's happening, good people? Macro Dirtcast number 5, about to throw down. What's going on, JD's nuts?
What's up, scrotum breath?
That's a good one. I haven't heard that one since the 70s. Really, really good. How are you today, brother?
I'm good. What's up?
We got a big slide in the S&P to talk about. Some volatility is always fun for a market podcast, right? We've got two sigma slides in the macro world. The euro and Aussie dollar are coming apart versus the yen. We've got a two sigma slide or a two sigma rally in the bond market, two sigma slide in rates. We've got three sigma slides in names like General Dynamics, Tesla, Roku, and the consumer discretionary sector. Two sigma slides in the NASDAQ, in the S&P, which is now off 1.5%, in Google, in the ARK ETF, in Square, Microsoft, in my big tech index. Is this the beginning of the big curl, JD? Give it to me.
Yeah, it is. I mean, this gets back to what we were talking about last week with the factor unwind, right?
Yeah.
And I said, I'm pretty sure. I mean, I've said it a bunch of places, but I'm pretty sure I said at the time that you're not going to unwind a 20-year trade in a week, right? Like large cap over small cap, growth over value has been working for 20 years. And on July 11th, 2024, we got the CPI number that kicked off the unwind. It is still happening. You have lots more downside in big cap tech, and you have lots more upside in Russell. If you pulled up a chart of the Russell, like just independently of everything else, if you pulled up a chart of the Russell, it's a bull market. Like with the Russell is like unch today,
Yeah.
with the S&P down 1.5%, NASDAQ down over 2%. Like this unwind there is so much pain in hedge fund land. There were all these lazy longs in tech because it had been working for so long. Lazy longs, man. That's the one thing you got to watch out for if you're managing money.
Oh, such a great point. And I want to do a little micro study on Nvidia as well, because very quietly yesterday, in a day where nothing was going on, Nvidia saw a little rally and closed a gap, right, which completes the price action on the way down. This way there's no gaps in the chart on the way down. Closes that gap, settles negative, and comes in today, and now we're teetering on the 50-day moving average. I mean, this thing is waiting to get cracked in the chin. Would you agree?
This is my favorite thing about Nvidia. Nvidia is a 3 trillion market cap. If the stock got cut by 75%, it would still be a 750 billion market cap, right? Like there's no, when people talk about margin of safety for investing in stocks, right? There is no margin of safety here. I forget what the PE is. It's trading at like 70 or 80 times or something like that, but there's no margin of safety. Google misses on earnings. Just you heard it here first. Google is going to be a 6 PE at some point. It is going to be it's not a super expensive stock. It trades at about 20 times. But do you remember when Facebook was in the shits and it got down to a single digit PE? The same thing is going to happen to Google.
Man, that is a bold call, and I'll give you the brass cojones award for making a call like that. It is really really hard to be short the U.S. government. And that's the way I look at Google. And at some point, the stock's going to meet its maker. And with what's going on in the world as a macrocosm, I definitely look at it like old world stocks or last world stocks like Google, Disney, Nike. A lot of those names are going to have a really tough time struggling in the next phase of this market. So we got a little bit of momentum on the downside here. NASDAQ through the 50-day moving average. It looks like, this is going to be the beginning of a more significant sell-off that materializes this week. The VIX. Today we've got the VIX, as I speak, making a new high at 16 3/4. We traded up to just above 17 the other day. Is this are we going into the 20s here, JD? Is this where we go into the washing machine and nobody knows what's up?
Yeah, I think so. But just keep in mind that Monday and Tuesday, vol sellers came back into the market, right? Like the overwrite funds have gotten so huge. There's a huge supply of vol selling that goes into the market. So, the VIX traded up to 16 last week, and it traded down to 14 on Tuesday. There's so much vol selling out there, and really what you need for these overwrite funds. I mean, if you're selling covered calls on something, the worst case scenario is the stock like goes down fast, right?
Yeah.
Because then the calls are worthless and you have unlimited downside. So we need something to break these overwrite funds, and a day like today is what does it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good point. That's a good point. I get a feeling we're going to look back at 4 o'clock and there's going to be a mud splatter on the screen. I think we might finally get our down S&P 2% down in the S&P in a single session finally after like 360 sessions.
Yeah, 330 days or something.
Yeah, we're around 350, I think, or something like that. But it's an unbelievable number. And what's amazing to me when I wrote that it's an unbelievable number. But when you consider that we've gone runs of 600, 700, I think we've gone 900 days on the max, of S&P without a 2% pullback. So I don't like to fade. I don't like to fade it until I see when it's over. Right? That's just a streak that you kind of observe and decide whether or not the odds are in your favor. This time around. What do you think about commodities? I talk about what's going on in the commodity market now as that deflationary hocus pocus. And that's where commodities look at the treasury market. They see that there's no inflation being interpreted and realize that they can go down quite a bit. We just saw LME copper drop $800 in a straight line. We just saw crude oil fall from 84 to 76 in 4 sessions. Is there more to go in the commodity space? Is there pain there, JD, or is this just a deflationary adjustment? Oh, and the hocus pocus part is when none of your costs go any lower, but CPI in the headlines goes to 2%.
Yeah. Do you remember the turtle traders? Do you remember hearing about that?
Refresh my memory. It sounds familiar.
So I'm going to get this wrong, and then people are going to correct me in the YouTube comments or something. But Ed Seykota was a famous trader, and he basically ran an experiment where he could teach people how to trade, right? So this is back in the early 80s during the big commodities bull run. And they all traded futures, and they were all super long commodities, and they each made like hundreds of millions of dollars. They all cleaned up. And one of the things I always wondered about the turtle traders is, were they really good, or were they in the right place at the right time? Were they all just long commodities during a bull market? And I've been waiting for a bull market like that in commodities for a long time. And I think we're close to getting one. Let me tell you the thesis, okay? Trump and Vance get elected, right? JD Vance is super bearish the dollar, right? He's written and spoken about many times about devaluing the US currency to increase exports. Trump feels the same way. So they get elected, they talk down the dollar, or perhaps we even do interventions, which is not out of the realm of possibility. And the dollar is 20% lower at the end of 2025, and emerging markets and commodities are in a new bull market. That's what I'm waiting for. I'm not touching commodities until that happens. I'm looking at commodities, and they're not bottoming yet, as you said. And inflation is coming down. It's not the right time to do this. But I think sometime in the next 6 months, you're going to get the starting gun for the commodities bull market. That's what I'm waiting for.
Man, I don't disagree. And excuse me, that rhymes with the idea that I've had that, when Nvidia and semis and the NASDAQ all pulled back because they were sucking all the oxygen out of the markets, some of that money is going to go right into hard assets.
Yeah.
And potentially because, we got rates coming off pretty hard here. As we know, like the commodity prices have backed off in response, but they're still within range. They're still, at levels that they can easily bottom and pick up again. The charts aren't fatally broken. They're just big mean reversions once again, right? The deflationary hocus pocus. Every time you think hard assets have a chance, the Fed comes along with this easing cycle and they all get deflated back down to where they came from. So we've seen that several times. Is there anything else that we want to touch on in the viral markets today before we go into a few other topics?
I mean, we could always talk about rates a little bit.
Yeah, let's do it.
I'm watching twos today. I'm watching the yield curve. Twos are bulletproof. We got some strong PMI numbers. The front end of the curve wasn't affected at all. It affected the back end a little bit. The curve is steepening. Um, that the steepening is not the pain trade. That is a very crowded trade. Everybody wants this trade to work, and it should work. So I think if Trump gets elected, you could have twos at 3% and bonds at 5%. You could have a yield curve that's 150 to 200 basis points positive in the span of a couple of months.
Wow.
So
And that's coming from last sale of like minus 18 basis points negative,
yeah,
right? And
and I mean, the curve is steepened from the last time we talked. The last time we talked, it was like minus 23 or something like that.
it
So
has, and we're on the steepest levels of the move so far right now, and we're literally at the top of that range that we've been in since sort of like 2023, right?
yep,
So that's what we've been talking about, like whether you can accurately interpret exactly why the curve is steepening like it is, which I believe that JD is doing, but whether or not you can interpret it correctly, what we expected to happen was the VIX to pick its head up and stocks to back off. So that this is exactly the type of response that we looked for from the markets, and it feels early. It feels like we're in the first three innings of that, and we'll get to some baseball stuff later on. But it feels like we're in the early innings of this adjustment. So it sure feels like we can get a steeper curve, lower yields, maybe even lower commodities, lower Nasdaq and tech. Forget it. That stuff's going to get whacked now.
yep,
So we've done a fairly good job, man, from the point of you urging me to take profits in the S&P right near the highs to
yep.
navigating people through this sell-off. Fucking A, yeah, let's hit the bobblehead for that. A good call is a good call, and there's not a lot of people out there putting their grapes on the table and making them. So we're going to continue to do that as long as we have breath in our lungs, me and JD, that's for sure. So let's move on to a little personal interest stuff. Obviously, the politics, you can't even get away from it. It's so in your face. I've been calling what happened a Biden coup because, I mean, I'm only 55 years old, but I've never seen a president sign off from a election race on Twitter with what was immediately proven as a fake signature and then disappear for several days. That's new to me, JD. Call me conspiratorial. Call me crazy for calling it a coup.
There was
Maybe
the funniest tweet I saw on that. Biden tweeted out that resignation letter or whatever, not the resignation letter, but not stepping down from reelection.
right.
And Dan McLaughlin at National Review quote tweets it, and he says, "I wonder if Biden has seen this yet."
Yeah. Literally, basis how everything has gone on, that's been the case. He says that he doesn't want to, step down from running in the election. Nancy Pelosi says, "Oh yeah, we can do this the easy way, buddy, or we can do this the hard way." Right? Barack Obama like has a conversation with
that has Obama's fingerprints all over it.
all over it, right?
Yeah.
Like all over it. Like, okay, you're done. I'm sorry, especially in light of what is clearly a failed assassination attempt on Trump, like 1 week later. And we're now seeing, global events that would normally, space out over 10 years happen in the same week. And it's getting really, really hairy. We have to make we got to hit another horn. We have to do our first official Hasta La Vagina award. We'll see you later, head of the Secret Service, Kim Cheadle. Right? Hit the bobblehead again. That's another good call because we eviscerated her from the moment that this event happened. And then she went up in front of Congress this week and literally got taken apart.
That was, I mean, I think we said last week, like that was just gross incompetence, just absolutely. And her hearing, I don't think she could have painted herself as a less sympathetic character. She had this monotone when she answered questions. She didn't have any information. Like, that was sort of an instruction manual. God forbid we ever get called before Congress and we have to testify on something, but that is not how to do it. That is absolutely not how to do it.
Well put, man. I mean, she was a visible deer in the headlights for the entire thing with her confused facia brute face on. Like, you couldn't even look at her anymore. And reps like Nancy Mace and a few of the one other woman that I saw that I forget her name that questioned her. She said, I think I had just caught you perjuring yourself, and,
Yep.
had her staff say, if that's correct in the notes that you guys find, please have her charged with perjury. I mean, the woman just got taken apart and had no choice but to wake up and resign.
Yeah.
Right.
Nancy Mace, by the way, I don't know what you know about Nancy Mace. She is the congressman from the district just south of mine, down in Mount Pleasant,
Oh,
just
is that right?
north of Charleston. So that is a very purple district. It's kind of flip flopped between Democrats and Republicans over time. And she's an interesting person. She was the first female graduate of the Citadel, the first
Wow.
female graduate of the Citadel. Like she's a tough lady, you know.
Yeah.
I don't think she's super smart. She doesn't strike me as like just some genius, but she's a tough lady. So
She's a street baller. I would not want her mad at me or investigating me or putting me in front of Congress and having to answer her questions. I'll tell you that.
yeah,
That's for sure. Um, do you know? I want to touch on this really quick. Um, I've really enjoyed the way David Portnoy, the Barstool Sports guy, has covered this whole Biden coup insertion of Kamala, and we're going to talk about Kamala. I know that you have something to say about that. Why don't we do this? Why don't we go into Kamala first, and then I'll touch base on Portnoy.
yeah. I mean, there's going to be an attempt to basically whitewash Kamala's 2020 campaign, where she said some pretty radical stuff. I mean, from immigration to gun control to everything else. But the thing we're concerned about here is taxes, because that's what affects the markets. Okay. So she wanted a wealth tax. She wanted a wealth tax. She wanted taxes on unrealized capital gains. She wanted higher income tax brackets, right? So she wanted brackets for people at the 2 million, 5 million, 10 million range, taxes going up into the high 40s. Like it's it's
It's
pretty
far
radical.
left. It's pretty
Yeah.
far left, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's something that we got to take notice of. And like you said about the whitewashing of
Oh,
her,
I forgot to mention. I forgot to mention. So during the pandemic, when she was campaigning during the pandemic, she said that she would forbid credit card companies from charging interest. Like, how do you survive as a bank, as a credit card, if you can't charge interest? She might be the most economically illiterate person to run for president in decades.
yeah, yeah, it's unbelievable. I mean, we've got the all the footage of the unburdened by what has been speech that she's given 75 times, if not 100. It seems to be the only playing card she has. And I mean, I like your comment about she's about to get the whitewash treatment. Man, they are already giving her the Lady Di treatment, right? There's already fake pictures of gymnasiums filled with people that are supposedly thousands of people there in support of Kamala.
She did
She's
not get one vote in the primary, not one.
not one.
She
And
had like 1% support.
today I already saw in the news that they're going around saying that she never had the job of being border czar. That was never under her control or jurisdiction. That had nothing to do with her. And you can just tell that they're going to categorically pick each one of these batshit crazy positions of hers, and they're just going to unravel it right in front of your eyes, and they're going to try to make her look like the best candidate that the left has seen since John Kennedy, in fact. So, but what I love about Portnoy is that he's kind of breaking ground and allowing people to comment on this stuff, right? He's like one angle that he's got, and I have a little bit of a relationship with Portnoy, but one angle that he's got is if you're an American and you love this country, you're allowed to talk and comment about what's going on with this shift of Democratic nominees and things like that. Right. And he's a very, very street smart guy when it comes to politics. And it's almost unbelievable to me that he's got this tight, patriotic, coherent, and informed commentary on things. I'm going to have Braden right now play this old clip of when Portnoy got a hold of a conversation I was having with Dimitri Kofinas about how traders were treating the world sort of nihilistically. Braden,
listen to this. Where's this idiot? Let's listen to this idiot. Listen to the words this guy uses. Tony Greer.
You expressed the frustration that's clearly coming out from the younger generation and needs to be heard, is that, they're feeling, as Americans, feeling totally disenfranchised. They see the stock market like this disco ball that's just running away from them. And it's like, wow, how do you latch on to this? And that's why the attitude has manifested itself through Barstool Presidente, of all places, saying, I'll show you how you fucking latch on to this. You get in there and you fucking buy stocks. They go up every day.
They do.
Right? And as that sounds to somebody that's been in the markets.
That was the mindset. Stocks go up every day. And they did, which was really, really cool. That was when Portnoy was getting into his trading phase. JD, tell me what you think of this character. Size him up for me. Let me know where he is on your radar screen.
Well, Portnoy has some good personal qualities. I mean, he's rich for a reason. I've actually seen his house in Miami because I have a friend who lives in the same neighborhood, and he built a new house in the Morningside neighborhood of Miami, and it's a pretty impressive house.
I'd imagine.
I did not really appreciate Portnoy during that pandemic bull market. I thought he was a complete ding dong, and I also think he was moving markets so much. I can only imagine the calls that he was getting, from some company who wants their stock to go up, calls Portnoy, hey, recommend my stock. And ultimately, if you remember, he quit trading just abruptly and disappeared.
Yep.
I think he got a tap on the shoulder from the SEC. They said, hey, look, cut it out.
They definitely told him he was playing with fire.
Yeah.
Right. There's no doubt he was in there naming individual names about the ones that he was grabbing, and they were going up 2% in the breath. Right. Like that's the stuff that you're talking about. It was, it's insulting to watch to people that have been in the markets for so long, and you kind of look at this guy and you're like, all right, clock's ticking on Mr. Portnoy. He's not going to last in this condition. So anyway, he's doing his best to, democratize the conversations about a lot of important topics. So I give him a lot of credit for that. Do you know that today, July 24th, for all the baseball fans out there, is the George Brett Pine Tar incident anniversary? JD, did you know that?
That is one of my favorite clips in baseball. George Brett comes running out of the dugout like a fire elemental. Just like I have never seen somebody more angry in my entire life.
Literally, and you got to look at the conditions, right? It's a regular season game in July, but he hits a 2-run home run. And what I love about the 2-run home run that he hit is that you and I were talking briefly about, like, let's talk about that Royals team that the Yankees used to play. They were unbelievable. And I mentioned some players, Brett, Clint Hurdle, Hal McRae, Amos Otis. And you're like, dude, what about UL Washington? I couldn't remember for a minute until I Googled his name, and UL Washington was the guy that always had a toothpick in his mouth. And you're like, this guy's out of his mind playing baseball with a toothpick in his mouth. He was the runner on first base when Brett hit the ding dong.
Wow.
Yeah. And then Martin comes out of the dugout, says, let's have the bat. And you can clear as day see the pine tar going up past the Louisville Slugger logo, almost to the end of the bat. And let me read this quote from Mel Allen when freaking George Brett runs out of the dugout. When they call him out, right? That's the end of the game. That's 3 outs. Mel Allen goes, well, the Yankees win. He is out. He is out. Look at this. Brett is out. He is out and having to be forcibly restrained from hitting plate umpire Tim McClellan, and the Yankees have won the ball game 4-3. Brett is called out for using an illegal bat or with an illegal substance on the bat. Holy shit.
Billy Martin was a baseball genius. He was a baseball genius.
Savant at every level. I mean, he was the player to watch in the stadium, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he was the guy to watch in the stadium from the position of being manager. Do you remember when Reggie Jackson would head back to the dugout and the two of them would go toe to toe?
Yeah. Actually, they showed a clip on that on one of the Yes games recently. They showed basically Billy Martin pulled out Reggie Jackson in the middle of an inning, in the middle of
That's
an
right.
inning
For loafing, wasn't it? Wasn't it
for
for loafing?
loafing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for loafing after a ground ball or something like that. I mean, that is legendary. And if
And
you want,
it was Elston Howard that got in between the two of them. You know,
yes,
when Elston Howard was like 6'5", 260, and he
moose.
was like,
He was a
you know,
moose. That's
yeah.
so great, JD. And I tell you, one of my favorite books that I have ever read is called The Bronx Zoo. And it is about that Yankees team from the late 70s, early 80s. And that's when baseball was so exciting and so raw. The book, I couldn't recommend it anymore if you're a Yankee fan or just a fan of that era. It's one of the coolest baseball stories. The dynamic between Steinbrenner and Martin, and between Martin and Reggie Jackson, and how they all pushed each other's buttons. Man, but Reggie was the straw that stirred the drink, right?
Reggie, he's over 70 now. He's in his 70s.
Yeah, man.
I think he's like late 70s actually. Yeah.
Makes sense. God bless him, man. He was an
You know,
exciting
I
player.
actually I can't give any details. I am friends with somebody who was in the clubhouse for the early 90s Yankees teams, right?
Wow.
And out of all the players in the early 90s Yankees, who do you think was hung like a telephone pole?
Don Mattingly.
No. No.
Um, I have no idea. Dave Righetti.
Bernie Williams.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting. Interesting. Good information. Good information. Bernie's got a pretty decent guitar game too,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
He's capable. He can play in front of an audience, which is impressive. How did you? I remember you were picking up guitar a while back. Did you ever?
So I did. I played for like 6 months, and then I got busy with the move, and I had to put it down. But I'm going to pick it back up again. But do you see these hands? I
Mm.
have like I have tiny hands,
Oh, really?
and I can't play bar chords. My finger doesn't go across all the frets. So like I, I really don't know what I'm going to do. You know, like it's like a physical impossibility. I have the smallest hands ever.
Okay, watch Tim Reynolds play guitar. Right, Tim Reynolds is the guy that plays with the Dave Matthews Band. He's like 5'6", standing on a freaking phone book, and he has small hands, and he plays guitar like Eddie Van Halen. Right, if you when you want to, your muscles adapt. The shape of your hand will adapt. Like no matter what, the size of your hand matters. But playing bar chords for me now, like my hand just melds into the shape, and it's just from muscle memory. And I can tell you that in my teens and 20s, it wasn't like that. And so it's
Yeah.
just a matter of like over time, your hand just knows exactly how to form into that shape that covers all the notes properly, and you get it. But I'm a chord banger, and I'm a guy that I know a lot of riffs. I have some race car guitars that sound absolutely awesome. But
I also like I have an acoustic guitar, and it's tougher on acoustic. It's easier on electric, you know.
yeah, oh yeah. I mean, there's nothing like that. You can feel the difference if you pick up a big Gibson Songwriter acoustic, and then you pick up a Fender American Stratocaster that kind of tucks under your arm, and you barely have to touch the strings to get the notes to clamp down.
Yep.
That action right there is the big difference between electric and acoustic, and why electric is so much friendlier and more forgiving to play.
Yeah.
So that's a good way to practice if you're getting into it there. Practice on your Fender American Strat. But that's it, man. I think that we've covered pretty much everything that we can cover today in fairly good form. The S&P is leaking off the screen at 55.09 as we speak. Commodities haven't bounced. Rates are still on their lows. I think we're going to be talking about the continuation of this sell-off when we get together for Dirtcast number 6 next week, right?
I will be here. I will be here.
All right, my man. That's a wrap.
Hasta la vagina.
Hasta la vagina.